Yes! 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 Yeah, thank you, Game Freak. Thank goodness. Game Freak isn't also dropping the regional variant idea from Sun and Moon. Alolan forms were an awesome idea, though it was a shame that they were limited to Gen 1 Pokemon. But now we have a confirmed Gen 3 Galarian form Pokemon. They aren't just limited to Gen 1 anymore. Yeah! So, what is up with these Galarian forms? How did they come to be? Let's figure that out today on Gnoggin. So this is Weezing. It's gotta be the new Alolan Executor joke, right? This thing is 9 foot 10 inches tall. That's a tall hunk. How does it even float anymore? And the amount of Britishness that it's got going on. Noble or otherwise well-off British citizens in the olden days famously wore top hats to show off their status. Top hats were very expensive, and the more money you put into making your top hat fancy, the more you could look down on everybody else around you. At the same time this was in fashion, chops and beards and huge poofy mustaches and the like were all also quite fashionable. It was the Industrial Revolution. Having a beard was dangerous for factory workers, so by having one along with the top hat, that look said, check it. I'm rich enough that I don't have to work in a factory. Not being poor is actually one of the defining factors of determining what a society commonly sees as stereotypically beautiful or attractive. In the classical ages, having some chonk was beautiful because it usually meant you were well off enough to buy food, all the food you wanted, and you could afford to laze about. It's the same reason pale skin and body hairlessness came into fashion. You aren't working outside, laboring away, and getting tan. Instead, you are sitting inside of a nice palace or mansion, sitting in your bath and cleaning yourself up. More recently, things have flipped a bit. A full body tan is often seen as sexy because you can afford vacation and relaxation time, and being fit or thin is more commonly seen as sexy because it means you take care of yourself and can afford healthier food options. Society has always revolved around the haves and have-nots. And this was no different in the United Kingdom's Industrial Revolution. The people who owned the factories got rich and were able to grow such facial hair and wear top hats and monocles and oh, look at the time on my pocket watch. I have an appointment to the gentleman's club. And those industrial factories famously had very large smokestacks. They were often burning coal for power, and coal produces a ton of smoke. So smokestacks were built very high to keep that as far above the city as possible. Of course, a load of soot still came down and polluted the absolute heck of the cities, leading to all sorts of illnesses. But in the Pokemon world, all this pollution in the air, well, that's what coughing and wheezing are all about. They are basically balloons filled with air pollution. Which brings us to the theory of how Weezing evolved into a different form in the Galar region. It was likely during the Industrial Revolution, which we see remnants of in Galar already. The air was already so polluted due to the factories that Weezings didn't make much of a difference. Perhaps they couldn't reliably use their poisonous gases to hunt prey anymore because the prey all got used to poisonous gases in the atmosphere constantly because of all the pollution. So, instead of hunting prey, Weezing started eating the pollution itself. You see, unlike regular Weezing, Galarian Weezing eats pollution and exhausts purified air out of its smokestacks. It's like a tree, but even more concentrated, and able to do so at a much more efficient rate. It's so efficient at sucking up pollution from the air that a lot of it has concentrated around its mouths, and that's what its beard stash things are. It's a bunch of pollution. And if the Weezing so chooses, it can actually spit up this poison that it's stored here to attack you, thus it still being poison type. But the process of taking pollution and purifying it is quite a fairy-like thing. Fairies are nature spirits and are often at war with mankind's metals and pollutants. So in the process of developing a digestive system for pollution, it perhaps inadvertently gained the fairy typing, since fairies are sorta all about that. Now how about them goons? Get out of here. Oh man! Kiss much? Motley Crue? You can't tell me that those weren't the inspirations here. Black and white, star design around the eye, the tongue thing. Come on. These guys pretty much defined hard rock, glam metal, hair metal, sleaze metal, all sorts of subgenres. And look, Obstagoon even has tufts of fur instead of spikes and straps that hard rock leather jackets typically have. That is exactly what's going on with this Galarian variant. Though interestingly, both of these world-famously notorious bands are American, not inherently British. I mean, they did do tours in the UK, but I do think there is an easy enough logic trail to follow here. Brits and Americans who are into these things often argue over who invented the genre. Ask a Brit and they'll normally say that they invented it. Then the Americans who are inspired by it changed it a bit and popularized it. Some Americans say the same, but others of course disagree. Famous bands and artists like Led Zeppelin, Gun, Tiger Tails, Bohem, Ozzy, the list goes on and on. Loads of metal bands and performers originated in the United Kingdom. But what's a more popularly iconic thing even to non-metal fans? That would be the face paint Motley Crue and Kiss did. It's instantly recognizable, even if it's specifically American. The genre as a whole is more so seen as British, and this face paint, though specifically American, is associated with the genre. You see where I'm going? Plus, turning Zigzagoon and Linoone black and white makes them match the colors of the European badger, common in the UK. So there's certainly a double inspiration here, a two birds situation. Then there's this new evolution, Obstagoon, a wicked metal gnoll. A gnoll is basically a mean, humanoid hyena. They were first written about by English fantasy author Edward Plunkett, 18th Baron of Dunsany, though they weren't popularized until Dungeons & Dragons used them. But yeah, that means even gnolls are a British thing. These Pokemon designers are doing an A+ job. Granted, Dungeons & Dragons did take the original gnolls and made them into what we know of them of today, and popularized them. But still, the roots. Now about this line. They are punks. Their descriptions state that they go wherever they please in zigzag patterns. They are rambunctious and often purposefully try to make people upset. They are a favorite among unhappy and angry youths, aka stereotypical punks. Obstagoon plays into this well. It's in the name, obsta as in obstacle or obstruct, which is also its main feature. It rarely attacks first. Instead, it taunts and crosses its arms, a very punk thing to do. And then it counterattacks with its obstruct move. Think about those punk-filled protests that sometimes go too far, obstructing public transit and all. It's stereotypical, but often things like this and knocking over trash cans to show the man is a very punk rock sort of thing. Which also is a genre that has much of its origins in the UK. You see, by obstructing the day-to-day normality, the day-to-day peace, you get attention to your cause. Though sometimes it does go a bit too far. Disrespect your surroundings! Now here's something interesting. According to the blurb about Galarian Zigzagoon, it's actually the original Zigzagoon. And then when it left Galar, it mellowed out over time, giving us the Zigzagoon we're already used to. Which is an interesting take. It wouldn't have been mentioned without a good reason. The common Linoone is a mixture of the Japanese badger, the striped polecat, and the ferret badger. Then Zigzagoon is the Japanese raccoon dog. Well, they're all somewhat related, I suppose, but it's not like these are all descendants of the European badger or anything. Perhaps then it's not about their biology, but just about their habitat and behavior. Outside of the Galarian culture, they may not have to act the way that they do, so they become more docile over the generations. Though they don't lose that attitude entirely, these Pokemon are still said to be tricksters and little thieves. What I'm getting at is that this may be linked to the idea that, well, the explosion of punk culture might not have happened if not for the common, proper British culture. It's a common belief that countercultures only develop when the culture they are countering grows too strong. Society is always going back and forth on a pendulum, and when it goes too far one way, it is going to be pulled back even further. It's why politics is such a mess. One side stays in power for a bit too long, gets away with a bit too much, so the other side hits back even harder. So then the options are for the original side to then hit back even harder, or they could finally find middle ground and mellow out a bit until it inevitably happens again. Social studies. That's why it's a thing that you learn in school. For a good while there in the 20th century, the UK had just the right amount of properness and politeness and culture and policy and all that led many youths to rebel harder than they ever had before. Oh yeah, I'ma turn my hair pink and knock over a trash can. I'll make all my music be super energetic and loud while singing about sad stuff. That'll show those rich, pompous gentlemen. You see, I knew I'd fail at a British accent, so I didn't even try. But I'm going to save most of the details there for the Team Yell video. But obviously, these Galarian forms were made for Team Yell to use in abundance. They are just too perfect for them. So what do you think about these designs and inspirations? Personally, I love every bit of what was shown in this trailer. Let me know down below, and until next time, you never stop using your noggin.